Why are those oral narratives so important in this art form, or even in general?
I think what is very beautiful about our culture is its diversity.
What are some of the good things that are happening to the art form today?
So in the current situation of not meeting an audience, the challenge is multiplied.
What do you think about the modernization of the ancient art form?
I'll tell you very simply, I have only one thought.
What sets Indian puppetry or this art form in India distinctly apart from their contemporaries in the rest of the world?
I would say Indian subcontinent again very consciously, because
let's talk a little about the oral traditions. You talked about the different communities, how the whole stories are very rooted in the region and the communities that are performing it. You also mentioned to me, off the show about how different people narrate, or there are different variations to the Ramayana. There was one very interesting deviation that you told me on phone about how Sita kills Ravana in one of the things. So can you talk to us about the oral traditions? Why are those oral narratives so important in this art form, or even in general?
I think what is very beautiful about our culture is its diversity. The fact that there is no one story that you can say this is an Indian story, because there are thousands of Indian stories, and each one of them is very Indian. And I think we are a very interesting subcontinent. If you look at Asia and South Asia, because unlike many other cultures across the world, we haven't lost touch with very old oral narratives. I mean, it's the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and maybe the Arabian Nights. These are the only three texts I can think of which are still orally narrated and still have audiences with memories from the grandfather and the great-great-grandfather, or the grandmother and the great-great-grandmother. But every other narrative is now reduced to a book.
Right.
And interpretations of a book. So the Ramayana and the Mahabharata might be in a book, they might be outside of a book. The thing with the oral narrative is that it changes every 100 kilometers, like language changes in India. The narratives change. So I was telling you, Kamba's Ramayana comes from Kamba's text in Kerala, but if you come to Karnataka, which is hardly that far, you have the Silakayata community, which tells their own Ramayana and Mahabharata versions. If you go to Andhra, they have their own Ramayana Mahabharata versions. You go to Tamil Nadu, they have their own Ramayana Mahabharata versions. If you go to Odisha, it's also only Ramayana, but they do the Adabhuta Ramayana, as opposed to Kamba's Ramayana. And the Silakayata Ramayana has 6 Ravan. So the Ravan doesn't change, but there's not one Ravan. So everybody commonly knows of Dashakantha, who is the 10-headed. Kantha is actually neck, but it's the Ravan with the 10 necks or the 10 heads. But this is the 100-headed Ravan, who was called Shatakantha Ravan. Dashakantha Ravan lived 1 sea away. Shatakantha Ravan lived 7 seas away. And it's a completely different character. It's very different from Dashakantha. There is also Mahiravan and Ahiravan. They are the 2 kings of Patal Lok and 2 brothers. There is Maya Ravan and Chaya Ravan. Chaya Ravan appears as an aberration after the death of Ravan, and Maya Ravan uses the form of Ravan. He's actually not Ravan. He is another Asur who uses the form of Ravan to recreate fear in people that Ravan is back. So these are completely different stories from each other. And this, I think this gives you an example of how do I say this? From intangible, how limited and tangible our understanding of the epics is becoming. And in 100 years, we have lost the sense that there were 5 other Ravans. and in the mainstream imagination, there's only one Ravan. So the Shatakanta Ravan story is very beautiful because Ram finds out when he is about to sit on the throne of Lanka. He tells everyone that I am the true deserving king because not of Lanka, of Ayodhya. I am the true deserving king because I've killed the 10-headed demon, and it was very difficult to kill him. Nobody else would have killed this man. And there is a voice from the heavens which says, "But there is still the 100-headed Ravan. So don't be so boastful. You haven't killed the strongest demon yet." So he must set out. He decides he must set out and kill the strongest demon. And when he reaches this land and it's Hanuman who flies him, because they couldn't cross the single sea. It was so difficult to cross the one sea. Now 7 seas would have been very difficult. So Hanuman says, "No, I can increase in size." So he becomes huge, and each soldier is holding on to one hair. There's a very beautiful image of this in the Chitrakati scroll paintings, and he's holding. They're all holding one hair of his, and Ram and Lakshmana are sitting on the back. Sita comes in and says, "Please take me," and they say, "No, no, no." Ram says, "Not you. Last time you went, all the trouble began because you went with us." And the voice says again, "Take her or you will regret it." So she's put inside Hanuman's ear. And they fly across. They reach this land, and Shatakanta Ravan says, "Welcome to my land. Your guests. You are our state guests. You can stay here, live here, and we will look after you." And he says, No, I have come for battle. I have not come here to be your guest." And there is an exchange of words, and Shatakanta Ravan really loses his temper. And when he loses his temper, he came as a man, as a king. And suddenly he starts becoming this 100 feet tall demon with 100 heads and 100 arms. And even though Ram and Lakshman try to fight with him, none of the arrows even pierce his toe. And at this point, he raises his foot and he crushes the army of Ayodhya. And they've all died. And then Lakshman is Murchit, Hanuman is Murchit, and Ram decides this is too much. We have to save everyone's life and run. When he runs, Sita comes out of the ear and says, "No, this is not okay. You must finish what you started. You started the war. He asked you to be his guest. Now you must see this to the end." And Ram is defeated. And at this point, Sita is so angry. And there's a very interesting verse that the puppeteers sing. They say, "We are not sure if she's angry at Shatakanta Ravan for hurting Ram, or if she's angry with all men for war, for all this fighting. She has had enough of war." And she takes the true form that she is, which is Chandi. And she kills Shatakanta Ravan. And then emerge all the demons from the netherworld. She kills all the demons. The Devs come saying, "Oh, the order of the world will be destroyed because now the demons are gone." She kills all of them. Wow. And she is in this rampage. She's the wild goddess. And Shiva has to die in her path. And when she puts her foot on him, she has the memory of Chandi and she stops. So this was is one of my favorite stories from the Sinakata Ramayana.
Wow. This is so beautiful because, it's almost like the emotions of, generations from that particular land, probably, if we probably dig deeper, I could be wrong, and please correct me if I'm wrong. If we dig deeper, maybe we will find the different wars that happened there that actually frustrated people out there, or frustrated mainly women out there, because and that's what led to this kind of a story where the woman power rises and says enough is enough.
Yes, so, and I think it's also the ancient Purush Prakriti narrative, which constantly looks at nature when it has had enough of human intervention and it just goes crazy, and you have natural disasters, a disaster after disaster. So you can connect it to either this fury of the female form or nature, and also women who experience but never asked, "You want to go to war or not?" And they lost their peace of mind, their men. So it's a very beautiful part of our narrative. And you're right, it's probably generational narrative which was passed along. And in the newer modern world, we start to look at male female as such entrenched singular constructs, whereas the divine feminine and the divine masculine come in this much larger form. So yes, I think these narratives are a constant reminder, and losing these narratives, we will probably lose diversity, of course, but our own inner fluidities,
Very true.
And become far too rigid in our identities and in our own perception of the world and ourselves.
Very true. And then you very beautifully put it, because for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the story that you said is, when you talk to a person, it's so important to understand the person that you're talking to, not just the name, the title, but the past, because we all carry it within ourselves. If I'm talking, or if I have a certain affinity to something, or if I'm going to be against something, it's not just the so many years of my conscious living, but it's what I've heard from my parents, my grandparents, and the generations before them. So it's all getting culminated. So it's so important. And I personally think, and this is also Gurukul's premise, that we have to be so rooted to understand our own self. And the more we understand our own self and our generations of the past, the better we are at connecting with other people. We naturally try to understand where they're coming from. And we believe that that's going to pave way for a harmonious and a peaceful society. And that's been a very powerful takeaway for me from the story that you just narrated as well. Very beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about the future of this art form. What are some of the current challenges that the artists from this art form are facing, which are probably prohibiting them from taking this art form to masses? And also, what are some of the good things that are happening to the art form today?
I think I would have answered this question in a very different way 2 years ago, before COVID and the lockdown, because COVID, the post-COVID lockdown situation has thrown everything, every structure of performance, meeting audiences, into into another realm. We are challenged, because where do you perform? Where do you go? How do you? Because public interface is such an important part of the puppeteer's life. It's a live medium. An audience is so important. So in the current situation of not meeting an audience, the challenge is multiplied. Already the big challenge was a certain loss of audience. Because all traditional forms depend on traditional audiences. For example, me as a practitioner of contemporary puppetry, I began in the city I live in, which is New Delhi. But very soon I could access, let's say, a Mumbai, a Bangalore, a Kolkata. And I realized that you have to build contemporary audiences, right? For whatever your art form might be, from Bharatnatyam to puppet theatre, you have to build your audiences. The traditional puppeteer, however, is linked to a generational audience. So the key challenge is how to build your audience, how to switch from your traditional audience to a newer audience. Because if the traditional audience is drying up, then the risk of the form dying out is very high. And that's what started to happen, which meant that the traditional puppeteer would have to then find an audience outside of his village or milieu. The two ways to do this was either to get audiences from outside to come and watch their work, or for them to travel out. So a certain contemporarization of the form. Look, what makes sense in the temple may not make sense in an auditorium in Bombay. So how are you going to reinvent yourself? This has been a big challenge for the traditional puppeteer. Post-COVID, even that world has shrunk. It's not like you can go to a theatre in Chennai and book it and perform there, or there's a festival which is happening anywhere very soon. Things are opening up, but we don't know. we're at the mercy of the next COVID wave. So this situation, the negative is, yes, a lot of puppeteers have needed support during this time. And in the Puppeteers Union, we used to keep getting calls on just, lack of food supply. They just didn't have enough to eat, for instance. Livelihood, of course, is a very big deal. So there's no livelihood. Some of them who had land, of course, had food. But then you need more than just grains, You need to pay electricity bills, you need to pay your children's school fee, so many expenses. So this has been one of the big challenges currently. But very interestingly, the thing that has happened is that the digital space has opened up. And with the digital space, physical travel is no longer needed. So it means that a puppeteer sitting in Kerala or Andhra or Karnataka can communicate with an audience sitting in any other part of the world. And this hasn't happened as much as it could, but it's begun to happen in very interesting ways. I'll give you two instances. One is, of course, Sajeesh has been doing digital classes. Gundu Rajuji, who is a traditional leather shadow puppeteer in Hassan in Karnataka, he made a film of the Shatakanta puppet video. Of the Shatakanta puppet story. And it's a small 10-minute video. And last year and this year, so many of the Durga Pujas in Delhi and Kolkata, whose cultural programs have gone digital, decided to show that story. So, the fact that he had never done this before, he suddenly has an audience in Kolkata while he's sitting in Hassan, is very exciting. It's or in Delhi while he's sitting in Hassan. I think these are exciting developments for the art form.
Sorry to interrupt, but what do you think about the modernization of the ancient art form? Like you mentioned, Sajeesh Palavar's robots, which he has installed in the Museum of Palakkad, if I'm right. So what do you think about the modernization aspect? Do you think we should stick to the tradition, or is this fine? Your thoughts?
I'll tell you very simply, I have only one thought on the matter is it's completely and totally the choice of the puppeteer who's the traditional carrier of the heritage. We who are not do not understand the circumstances they are in, and also the very important thing is that the tradition lived for 1,000 or 2,000 years because it's constantly adapted itself. If it hadn't, it would have died out 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago. So I think it is they who are the carrier of the heritage who are the best decision makers, because this is their livelihood, this is their life, and only they should be deciding what next. However, having said that, I think they need to be armed with very good training, which is what is lacking in the art form currently. Even though, and you can see the difference, Sajeesh Pulavar or Jagannath Singha, who comes from the string puppet tradition of West Bengal, these two people, once they came to the training program, the foundation program run by UNIMA, they went back with a new enthusiasm, because there's a lot of, what is the point in carrying on? Oh, it is so difficult. I will get an easy job in a mobile repair shop, or I will work as hospital staff, or I'll work as this or that. That is broken. There is suddenly a realization that what you have is of enormous value, and you are the carrier of that heritage. Two, a realization with training that if you up the skills, the product, and I'm saying the word product very consciously, immediately gets into a better quality. And then the takers increase. And the third and most important thing is that then you get network, because in a school system, you're not alone. You're meeting teachers, students, lecturers, and people get to know about your work, you get to know about their work. So I think this kind of a forum for traditional puppeteers, all puppeteers, not just traditional, all puppeteers, where training skills are imparted, where exposures are given, is absolutely imperative. Because if you look at the rest of the world, France and Germany, between the two countries where their population is a percentage of our population, have about 800 puppet theatre companies.
Wow.
And between them, they have about 6 puppet schools. and the level and skill set of puppeteers is fantastic, because you're trained for 3.5 years, you come out with puppet creation, making, whatever skills. They've lost their old heritage. Nothing of their past remains, but they're creating a new heritage, but beginning at a very high, setting a very high bar by setting up a very good training system. So we have an edge, we have a heritage. All we need is to raise the bar by setting up a very good training system. And also, it's remarkable. We did a workshop of traditional puppeteers. There were 8 in all. They came from different traditional forms. They didn't know about each other's tradition. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, we can't, it's like this tradition in Odisha doesn't know about that tradition in Tamil Nadu. So they might know about Bengal, they might know about Assam, about the region.
In the neighboring states, but not.
Yes, not.
Yeah.
And the conversations that grew, because they were all young puppeteers from the different states and the different traditional forms, have been incredible. Now they have a WhatsApp group where they're sharing work with each other. This one's like, I know how to make leather, I can teach you this. So what's happening is that skill sets are being passed, and it's cross-pollination of the best kind, because it's within the peer group and it's within various heritages. So I think that's very necessary.
Very beautiful. You mentioned about France and Germany, and there is this puppetry across the globe, even in Southeast Asian countries. What sets Indian puppetry or this art form in India, distinctly apart from their contemporaries in the rest of the world?
See, I would say Indian subcontinent, again, very consciously, because right from India, the political boundary of India as we recognize today, to let's say Indonesia, is a very unique region, because we have this generational puppetry which hasn't had any breaks, which is continued, and all these countries have oral narratives, and all these countries have both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and all of them have puppet theatre. So I would say this region is a unique region because there is no break from the past. Despite whatever might have happened in the region, where the entire region was colonized by various during the let's say 18th, 19th, 20th century, the intangible heritages continued, and they continued to be not just cosmetic, like tourist shows or whatever, but very much a part of the cultural fabric, the social fabric. So I would say that is what is very unique. Whether you go to Malaysia or Indonesia or come to India, it is, what really stands out is that a puppet show is never really just a puppet show. This word puppet show, it comes from the West, where you show your puppets. But we don't show our puppets. Our puppets are an instrument of bringing to the audience, almost an entire, how would I say it? And almost in that moment, you are taking in intangible heritage of 1,000 years. Right? So the puppet is an illustration, but the narrative is the container. The puppeteer is the wise person. It's a complete experience. I mean,
It's almost like blowing life into those dolls, right?
Well, I would say it's more than that. It's actually bringing to life a story which otherwise doesn't exist in your daily life. You're living,
Sure.
but suddenly that night, in that moment, the story is alive. These people are real. Those characters are alive. I remember watching a puppet show in Java, and the puppeteer performs alone, and he has an entire orchestra performing for him. And when the first puppet walks in, you just realize that what you're watching is not just Javanese puppetry, you're watching a little bit of Indian puppet theatre as well, because the Ramayana traveled from here to Java. So we are looking at thousands of years of travel history. When I'm watching a clown in Tamil Nadu, I'm also watching Balinese history there. So we have to understand that political boundaries are temporary things. They are recent things. In 100 years, this might not remain at all. Something else might be in its place, as it has for hundreds of years. But these cultural fluid journeys are very exciting because they bypass political boundaries. And that is what the heritage is. The heritage is that you have these lines and suddenly you insert yourself as an audience in sort of almost these energy lines, and you see something and you realize, oh my God, I'm a part of something so much larger than me. And the minute it comes to you via the television, it's so reduced to a scriptwriter, TV producer, and TRP ratings. It's not the same as watching it in its milieu and this kind of. That's what I would say is very unique about our Southeast Asian culture. It's exceptional that way.
Sure. Wow. This is so fantastic. I almost want to jump out and go watch a puppetry show now. So we've seen in the history that many kings are fond of certain art forms over the other. Are there kings in the history who have promoted this particular art form, who's paid a lot of attention to this and taken this forward?
Many. Actually, most of the patronage came from the kings. So Mysore, for instance, the Maharaja of Mysore was a big patron of the Karnataka leather shadow puppet form. In fact, the Karnataka leather shadow puppet form had got banned by the British for sedition because they used to carry anti-British propaganda at one point. And then it's the Maharaja of Mysore who struck a deal with the British and restarted the form. So there's a lot of there's a lot of socio-political, cultural history there. Amar Singh Rathod was a patron of Katputlis, which is why the Katputliwalas are so numerous and traveled so widely with his story. In Manipur, the Maharajas of Manipur patronized puppet theatre. It's the same in Assam. In Bengal, the Kuch Bihar royal family, several royal families were patronizing the local art forms, kept alive the festivals in which they were invited specifically to perform. So it may not have been a direct patronage to the puppeteer; it would be to the festival, which was showcasing their work. So I would say the traditional patronage was always kings, local, well-endowed, rich families, and a lot of temples. Similarly, if you look at, I was telling you how patrons would give leather and the puppeteer would make. So the leather and the amount of money that came to the puppeteer from the patron was usually a rich family, who wanted, let's say, something done in the grandfather's memory. Now you have things like park benches or statues. So that back then it was leather puppets. So a lot of this kind of patronage also came in. And there's a whole, I think there's several researches on who the traditional patron was by following names written on the puppets. Because very often the patron's name was written or called out during a performance. So the more well-known ones are, of course, the big royal families. But there are many smaller patrons we find out only through very old puppets and these things that are letterings that are written.
Wow, beautiful. So what would you tell the audience watching this show who want to help or do their tiny bit in preserving this art form? What is it that we as audience can do? Other than, of course, going to the theaters and watching it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I tell parents, especially of children, is next time you have a birthday party, now they all appear the same, a bunch of children come to your house, they eat cake, you want them to have fun. Take your child to a traditional performance instead and take all the other children, because it'll be a once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah.
For both your child and your children's friends. It'll be an absolute once in a lifetime. And I think for this access to traditional performers, I would say get in touch with UNIMA. UNIMA is the Indian Puppet Theatre Union. And there is a directory of puppeteers on it. And if anybody wants to read about puppetry, there is a free journal on it, and you can become a member and receive updates, etc. So I would say one of the ways is to keep in touch with the puppetry world take children to theaters. Also, I think when I always do this to my students, when you go to a mela, a Suraj Kund Mela or one of these heritage melas, Dakshin Chitra, for instance, had Selvaraj sitting at Dakshin Chitra for many years and doing performances. You will see leather lamp sellers, and all of them are puppeteers. So have a conversation with these artists about who they are and where they come from, and ask them to show you their puppets, because that's a whole exciting world. We just see sort of all of the consumerist sort of surface thing of it, but it's a fascinating story behind who people are. And I would say extend it to all craftspeople. Where did they learn it? Who taught them this? What is this art form? What is the training of it? Are there classes? Do you learn it by watching your uncles and aunts and sisters and brothers? It fascinates me when I go to the family of a traditional puppeteer. Their grandson, who's 2 years old, is already playing the tabla.
Wow.
How come? He's like, no, this is how he'll learn puppetry. Now today he'll play the tabla. From tomorrow he'll sing along with me. He'll sit backstage with me. He'll see how these puppets are born, and this is how it comes into your bloodstream. So I think to have this conversation with a traditional artist is fascinating. Our focus has been, we do end up hearing urban artists so much more, contemporary artists so much more. There are enough television interviews, written interviews, post-show conversations and things, but this does not happen with the traditional artisan. And I think they make for fascinating conversations, and ask them to tell you a story from their narrative heritage. And you'll always hear a variation.
Wow, this is very, very concrete takeaways that we have from this interview. And this has been one of a very eye-opening interviews for me personally. And thank you so much. I know every time I talk to you, Anurupa, it's always been a revelation about myself, about my land, and the job that I'm doing. Thank you so much for yet again opening my eyes to things that I don't know, and and for inspiring our children and our parents to do something away from the normal, which we are very sure is going to enrich their experience.
It's wonderful you're bringing oral heritage and things to children, which is not happening enough, clearly.
Sure, yes. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.